All set, Kathy? All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Public Council meeting, July 15th. Roll call, please.
Councilman Sakala?
Here.
Councilman Masseri?
Here.
Councilman Tanella?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Peterson?
Here.
Mayor Vorgo?
Here. Flag salute, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everybody, for coming out today. Going to item 2 on the agenda, approval of minutes. Item 2, I'm sorry, thank you very much. Adequate notice of this meeting was duly provided to the Verona Cedar Grove Times and Star Ledger by email and mail on or before April 8th, 2019. Not that one.
December 27th.
Thank you. December 27th, 2018, filed with the Township Clerk and posted on the public bulletin board in the municipal building lobby in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Okay. Moving on to item 2A on the agenda, approval of minutes. To consider approval of minutes of regular public meeting, June 3rd, 2019. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second, Mayor.
Roll call.
Councilman Sakala?
Yes.
Councilman Masseri?
Abstain.
Councilman Tanella?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Mayor Vorgo?
Yes. Item 2B on the agenda, to consider approval of minutes of special public meeting, June 17th, 2019. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Sakala?
Yes.
Councilman Masseri?
Abstain.
Councilman Tanella?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Mayor Vorgo?
Yes. Moving on to item 3A on the agenda, rejection of bid, to consider resolution concerning rejection of bid for reconstruction of Harper Terrace. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Sakala?
Yes.
Councilman Masseri?
Yes.
Councilman Tanella?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Mayor Vorgo?
Yes. Item number 4, the meeting is now open to residents on the, residents of the township wishing to be heard on any item on the agenda. Seeing none, I'll close that portion. Item number 5, reports of township officials. Mr. Tucci is not here today, so I am going to go to you, Ms. Stutz. Any reports?
The only thing I have, Mayor, is there was a block party request in the packet from a resident who had a block party last year also. This is a repeat request. It's not scheduled until, I think, September. I'm sure that Mr. Tucci, if he hasn't already, will notify the appropriate departments as to the date and time. We just kind of need to.
Do you want us to poll the council, or
Yeah, if nobody has no objections.
are there any
No
objections?
objection, Mayor.
No.
No objection.
Then that's it.
That's it. Thank you, Ms. Stutz.
Oh, one other
Oh,
thing, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
We did have a letter of interest from Alex Conti. I did not set up an interview yet. I can set one up. You know, I wanted to notify the governing body first for August, if you want him to come in August. He didn't specify any particular committee.
Sure.
I don't think, the email, I think, was in the packet in June probably, or
Mayor, may I ask a comment? He sits on
It's
the
in the- it's in the
Environmental
packet.
Commission right now, correct?
he does.
Right.
He
So is he
does.
looking to be added to another committee?
He is.
Okay. So with regard to Mr. Connie, obviously, he's done a great job on the Environmental Commission. Typically, in the past, we've limited the residents to one committee per resident as opposed to having 2 or 3. Is that correct, Ms. Stutz?
That's correct.
That's been kind of the policy that the council's adopted, so as much as it's good to see his interest. I mean, it's kind of, it'll be a little bit from what we followed in the past.
If I may, Councilman Tanell, so he had expressed some interest to me for the Downtown Advisory Committee,
Okay,
which is one of the reasons, I don't know, it sounds like it may be more suited to his area of expertise, which is why I think he wanted to come in and interview, or at least have a discussion,
So maybe move him from one to the other.
maybe. So, I mean, whatever the council's pleasure
Yeah, I
is,
don't
but
know.
I wanted to at least
Yeah.
give some of that background. So I had encouraged him to apply for the position.
so would you like me to schedule him for an interview in August then?
Council's
Before our
pleasure.
next meeting?
Yeah, based upon that, I have no objection.
Any objection?
Mayor, I had the opportunity to sit with Mr. Conti this past year in Environmental Commission. He's done a great job. He's been present. He's contributed to the commission. He's provided some great ideas, and he's been available. I would absolutely encourage the council to meet with him, hear what he has to say. Perhaps he doesn't know that he can't sit on more than one committee, and he'll have to make a choice, but I have no objection to bringing him in for an interview and setting that up whenever the council's pleasure.
Agreed. Yep.
Sure, and Councilman Tennell, thank you for, you've informed me
Right.
about that, otherwise I would have explained that up front. But I appreciate that, so if there's no objection, we'll bring him in and for our August
Well, there's
meeting and
nothing
have a
to say that
discussion.
You get locked into one committee for.
Sure,
Right.
right,
Ad infinitum, so.
sure. So we'll add him to our interviews for
Yes.
August. Okay? Anything else, Ms. Stutz?
That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Visconti.
I don't have anything other than our office drafted the two ordinances that are up for consideration tonight, so it might be more appropriate if you have any questions about those. I'll be happy to answer them while the council is considering the introduction or when they're up for second hearing down the road.
You're referring to items 7A and 7B on the
Yes.
agenda?
That's something we don't want to discuss here. If they have any. Okay. So we also, our office also did a memo to you. It's a attorney-client privilege memo regarding a tax appeal. I'm not going to get into the specifics of it, but if you have any questions for me, by all means, feel free to ask them. I think it's pretty straightforward regarding recommendations from our professionals and what action the council is encouraged to take, but certainly does not have to.
Sure. Mr. Visconti, you're referring to items 7A and 7B on the agenda?
The two ordinances, correct.
Okay. So council's pleasure, we'll discuss those when we get to there. Okay. Anything else?
No, sir?
Okay.
Whether
Do you need me?
The tax appeal settlement needs to,
Do we have to vote on that now?
yes.
I
Okay.
didn't think there was a resolution for it.
No, there's not a resolution, but
Why
we're
was there-
gonna authorize the township attorney to proceed, and then it'll go to resolution.
Okay. So do we have any objection to the
So it's
proposed?
kind of like a straw vote,
Sure.
not really a vote,
Okay.
but a discussion as to whether or not you want to proceed with the proposed settlement. That's
Sure.
basically what you're making a decision on.
And like I said, there's a memo from our office in your packets tonight if you want to brush up on it.
Does any of the council members have any objection to the proposed settlement?
No, Mayor.
No, Mayor.
Okay, so authorization to proceed.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for guiding us through this first meeting. Mr. Visconti, anything else?
That's all I have.
Okay, so moving on to council reports. Councilman Messeri,
Pick on the new guy.
you know what?
All right, thank you, Mayor. I'll remember that. So, it's my first meeting since the swearing in, and I had a vacation in between, so I don't have much to report.
Fair
Other than
enough.
it's nice to be here, and I'm glad that I'm part of this team, and I look forward to all the activities this summer. Looking forward to the summer concerts, I already missed one, and National Night Out, which is coming up, and I wish everybody a safe and happy summer. Hopefully, everybody enjoys this great weather that we're having.
Well, Councilman Messeri, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to working with you over the next few years.
Thank you,
And hopefully many years beyond that.
Thank you.
Councilman Sakala?
Just, I guess, one or two quick things. One, I know Mr. Tucci wasn't here, but he did put something in the packet that I know he would have mentioned if he
Yep.
were here. There's a commendation in the packet for Officer Christopher Lynch, and I just want to recognize Officer Lynch for the work that he did on June 25th in apprehending some juveniles who stole a car in town. And I didn't want that to just go by the wayside.
Absolutely. I'm glad I was going to point that out as well.
So thank you to Officer Lynch, and it's always nice to see accommodation for our police in our packets. And the other thing was just a quick report on this past Saturday. David Njoku, one of Cedar Grove's finest athletes, an NFL star, came back to town to run a camp for the kids in town. It was Saturday from 12 to 3. It was very well attended. NFL Films was there, got a lot of press, but most of all, David took a lot of time to spend, as much time as he could with all the kids there and shake hands and take pictures and teach them how to play football. So it was a great day, and I'd like to just say thank you to him for always remembering Cedar Grove. I think this is third year in the NFL. It's his third year back to Cedar Grove to do this. So it was a great day. So, that's all.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Tonello?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to congratulate you again. Looking forward to you this year as you as our mayor.
Still getting used to it.
You're looking at there. That's good. Congratulate
Thank you.
Councilman Misseri. Looking forward to working with you over these next few years. It's I heard the word team, and I couldn't agree more. I'm looking forward to working with this team, especially this year. Mayor, have you spoken with the manager about the Route 23? I know you mentioned at the reorganization meeting, and I know that's one of the questions all of us, I think, keep getting asked by residents. When is it happening? When is it happening? I was in Food Town last night.
And you get the
And so
question.
I got the question again, and I think the last time at the reorganization meeting, Mr. Tucci had mentioned August. I don't know if you had any update. Have you spoken with him since then?
So my last conversations were July, August.
July, August.
But in reality, it looks like it may not be July or August because they would be staging right now.
Right.
So, but that's the latest information that he had was this summer.
Got it.
And I was hoping to ask him today
Yeah,
as
right.
well. So, but the latest information is this summer.
There is some work going on down at Pompton and Millfield Avenue. I didn't know if that, the signs up, road work, I didn't know if that had anything
Right.
to do with it, maybe wishful thinking that it did.
Any type of road work we see over there, we think it's it, right?
Yeah, because if they're starting from that end and working their way down, maybe they are starting to do
Maybe they're
something
starting
there.
to stage
But that's
now.
total conjecture on my part. I have no.
Yeah, and I believe Mr. Tucci said the contractor who's doing it is Smith Sondy. So I haven't seen, any of their trucks up and down. But it's certainly worth following up with Mr. Tucci again to see where that stands.
Right. Okay. That's all I had, Mayor.
Anything else?
That's it.
Deputy Mayor Peterson?
Good evening, Mayor, and
Good evening.
congratulations to you again.
And congratulations to you as well.
And Councilman Misseri, look forward to working with everyone over the next year. I don't really have a report. I just wanted to make mention of our dedication last week. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have it on video for the members of the town, but we dedicated the new Panther Park to the current team, and the infield is done. The town did a beautiful, well, the town didn't do it, but they did a great job in working to get it done. The infield at Panther Park, it looks so amazing. It's funny, I was at a softball tournament over the weekend, and the Rutgers coach came up to me when he knew I was from Cedar Grove to compliment me on how beautiful our field is. So, and it's known throughout, like, we really have a beautiful town. I know Mr. Tucci, Marisa, Mr. Palumbo, so much work goes into making that happen. So I just wanted to recognize that. I want to encourage all of our residents to make sure that they take advantage of everything going on this summer, the summer concert series, Movies Under the Stars at Morgan's Farm that Municipal Alliance is putting on. And I guess that's about it. So that's all I
Thank
have.
you, Deputy Mayor.
You're welcome.
So my report, I just have 2 items on my report. Number one, to update the council on the Fearon Memorial. Tom Tucci and I met with Janice Fearon about 2.5 weeks ago down at Panther Park. We met with a landscape architect to take a look at what we could do down there. We got feedback from Janice. All of her kids showed up to see what they would like to see in that memorial down there. Tom provided some great ideas, and we are looking to do that dedication in late September / early October, depending on what dates work best for everybody in the council and the entire Fearon family. So So if you have any questions there, you might see some action going on down there with, they might reconfigure the rock, the boulder, turn it around. We're ordering some benches now, and some lighting that we're looking at some solar lighting. So that way we stay within budget. So the other item that I have on for my report is more of a question. So as you all know, we're working on the downtown. We're trying to attract businesses to our downtown area. We have the repaving that's going to be hopefully coming up within the next couple of years or months or whenever it is. But as I said in my speech, we're really starting to see that change come to the downtown area. And one of the things that I'd like to be able to see is we have a lot of bikers in town, mountain bikers. We have the trails in town, and one of the things that we've always talked about is having people be able to walk, ride up and down Pompton Ave. So a thought that I had was to maybe add some bike racks to Pompton Ave. So we have some benches there now where people can sit. But if you look up and down Pompton Ave, there are currently no bike racks where anybody can safely park and lock their bikes. That's not actually on a sign or something like that. So I spoke with Mr. Tucci about it. He explained that there might be some challenges with regard to a right-of-way, but he suggested that the first thing that we do is we have a discussion here first to see if there's any objections or any thoughts or any concerns that the council would have with regard to adding some, maybe about 4 bike racks to Pompton Ave.
The only comment that I have on that is that Matt Kniff, son of Robert Kniff, who was an Eagle Scout, did his Eagle Scout project about 2 to 3 years ago, and it was adding bike racks around town.
Okay.
And we'd have to speak to him, or maybe Mr. Kniff may know better, but I think that the right-of-way issue was a big problem with where he could put them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if he could have put more, out in the Pompton Avenue area, he would have, because I think that's what the initial plan was, but I think he hit a snag, so we really have to.
I'm glad you raised that. So Mr. Tucci and I spoke about that right-of-way issue. So when we have the outdoor seating that you'll see out there, that has to stay 10 feet from the curb, is what I understand. So one of the ideas that Mr. Tucci had was if we were to buy the bike racks and donate them to the property owners, because we could put it on the property owner's property and give it to them. And then that would solve the right-of-way issue and the maintenance issue. So that was one of the ideas that Mr. Tucci had, but we would ultimately have to buy the bike racks and then provide it to the property owners. So, and I'm kind of thinking where the benches are now. If you look at we have benches all throughout town. They're out of the right-of-way. So something similar to that. I'd be happy to work with Mr. Kniff and see what ideas he had. And let's incorporate them into the process as well, if we can go forward with it. So is there any objections to us taking a further look at it, getting some pricing on some bike racks?
Good idea.
Okay. That's all that I had. So now I can move on, Ms. Stutz, to items 6A, B, C, and we've added D to the agenda, and I can take those all together. Ms. Stutz, do I have to read them all?
Just a summary of what they are. They're approval of raffle applications, and each lists the organization.
Okay. So items 6A, B, C, and D are to consider raffle applications for Somerset Hills Learning Institute, Cedar Grove High School APT, Cedar Grove Elks, and the Alpine Learning Center. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Councilman Sakala?
Yes.
Councilman Messeri?
Yes.
Councilman Tinella?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Mayor Vargo?
Yes. Item 7A on the agenda is to consider introduction of pending ordinance number 19-845 to purchase and lease of Block 250, lots 37, 81, 101, and 141 from the city of Newark.
Mayor,
Miss-
I move for the introduction of pending ordinance 19845 to be published in summary in the Verona Cedar Grove Times as a pending ordinance with the public hearing scheduled for August 12, 2019.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any discussion? I do have one question on this here. So if you look, Mr. Visconti, there's Exhibit B attached to it, which is the use and occupancy agreement.
Yes.
So under Exhibit B, the use and occupancy agreement, we had discussed in the past, so just for the public's edification, there's a use and occupancy agreement that's attached to the purchase of this property because the city of Newark has a water testing facility, which is the hut that you see as you're driving by the reservoirs on your right. You'll see the building on your left. When we were going through the process, they didn't have anywhere to put those facilities, so they asked if they could essentially rent it back via a use and occupancy agreement. We had discussed a 2-year term. So the only question that I have, and one of the concerns that I have is, we had discussed a 2-year term, that it would not exceed the 2 years. But if you look at paragraphs 4 in conjunction with paragraph 5, the first term is 2 years, but then if they cannot vacate the property before the end of the initial term, the seller shall be granted an initial extension for a 6-month period. And then after the initial extension, if they're still unable to vacate the property, then the seller shall negotiate a monthly fee. So my only concern with that is there's no identified time frame. So with the use of those terms, shall negotiate a monthly fee, an initial 6-month extension, my concern is they could be there forever if we don't put some time frames in there. I don't know if anybody else on the council has saw that or has any concerns.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't what we initially, directed, the manager to do. I don't know, he's not here to tell us what happened in the negotiations. So I imagine that they tried to negotiate what we wanted, and this is what we got. So, I have a problem with it. I don't know that it would mean if it was a matter of having to buy the property with this use and occupancy agreement or not buy the property.
Right.
Then it's a no-brainer for me. It is what it is. But we don't know that.
Right.
So,
Maybe it'd be helpful if we understand, do we know where we stand in this process? Is this the final one, or is there room for negotiation? Because I agree with Councilman Sakala that, look, this is ultimately not a deal breaker in buying the property, but I would like to see some more defined terms around there. If they don't get it if they don't move within the first 2 years, you got to show us some reasonable progress or something, some type of reasonable progress clause to show that they're looking or that they've seen other properties or that they're building or something along those lines to show that this is not going to be for the next 20 years. I don't know if there's any other thoughts.
Unfortunately on this has been going on.
This is Mr. Zelensky.
Yeah, this is
Right.
Josh Zelinsky's office. This is
Empty.
carried over from when they did. So we weren't in the room to know, it's this, take it or leave it or not. But if you'd like, I'm certainly happy to relay the message to Mr. Zelinsky.
may I just ask a question?
Yeah, please.
I'm gonna see if that's what they want to do.
Would you happen to know this?
'Cause this is the
Time
introduction.
frame on Mr. Stutz, maybe is there a time frame in getting this resolution passed? I mean,
I don't know.
do we need to get this resolution passed in a manner in which, we're supposed to close next week or the week after, or?
Well, this ordinance has to come back for second reading, and that won't be until August, because this has to go to the planning board. So even if you were to introduce today, it's up to you how you want to handle it. I don't know the answer to whether this is a firm timeline. It has to be done by August. All I know is, for us to get it adopted, we have to have first reading and second reading on either side of a planning board meeting. There has to be a planning board meeting in between. That's why this isn't coming back for the first meeting in August or any sooner than it is. If you'd like to hold this, again, I don't have a great answer for you as to whether it's life or death. I don't believe it is. No one has conveyed to me that, it has to be introduced at this meeting. It has to be adopted that meeting. Otherwise, we can't move forward or we'll lose the deal. But,
Is it?
yeah, of course.
Miss, let's go ahead.
Is it possible to extend out the public hearing on the ordinance and adoption until September to give the governing body more time to get answers to their questions, rather than introduce it tonight and adopt in August. Is it possible to have the public hearing the first meeting in September, public meeting in September?
Again, no one has told me that this has to be adopted by August 17th or August 18th to convince me that we're up against a hard deadline. So if we'd like to
Or do you
delay
want
this a
to
month,
pull it? I don't know.
we can do that. What I don't think we should not introduce tonight and then say we're going to push it back for second reading until September. Either we introduce tonight and we plan to move forward in August, or we delay everything a month. Because once it's introduced, if we're gonna change it, it won't matter whether we change it in August or September, we'll still have to reintroduce it, have it go back before the planning board. It's not really gonna save us some time, because it's a fundamental change to one of the terms. So we sort of have to hit the reset button and start all over.
So, Mr. Visconti, so if we request some change, so if we introduced it now, and then there was a change to just that exhibit by putting, not changing the material terms, but by just putting some timeframes around it, it would have to be reintroduced after that.
Well,
Is that what I'm hearing?
it depends on whether the change is material or whether it's substantive or not. If we're not changing whether they have the 6 months, but if we're only saying, there has to be additional conditions attached to it, we may be able to argue that depending on what it is, it's not substantive and doesn't need to be reintroduced, doesn't need to be sent back. It could be, substantially similar and continue forward. But I just don't know exactly what those terms are, so I don't want to lock in and say, yes, we would have to reintroduce it, no, we wouldn't. I don't know exactly with what we're dealing with.
Councilman Sakala?
Mayor, in light of what we're hearing and in light of the fact that this doesn't really comport with what the council thought it was going to be, I would make a motion to table this for the next meeting, the August 14th meeting for introduction?
August 12th.
August 12th meeting for introduction. I think it's safer bet just to table it for now. Let's work out the details and then we'll introduce it and get it passed in September.
Agreed.
Yeah,
I'll second that motion.
Yeah, I'm in agreement on that. Is anybody aware of any other time constraints that we had with the city of Newark on payment or closing this or anything that,
The only thing with the payment, I believe it's had to be this year. I don't
Okay.
know if there's something sooner than that, but
okay,
before the end of the year, that was the one condition.
okay, because I do think it's an important enough term to make sure that we at least get some more defined terms.
And
I don't-
Mayor, I think there was also,
They don't have a meeting.
also we talked about the use of the property too, in terms of, vehicles and maybe limitation on vehicles. And when I see here, it says that, they'll continue to utilize the paved areas for ingress and egress. I don't know if my recollection is we talked about a limitation in
We did.
number of vehicles and amount of traffic they have in and out of there, and that's not really dealt with in this use and occupancy agreement either.
Agreed, and I think we had discussed maybe even trying to narrow the use where they can use
Yeah.
with either a fence or just identifying that they can use 100 feet outside of there or something along those lines. I agree. So the use and occupancy agreement definitely, it looks like it has some work to do. So if there's no objection, we'll table this for now. And Mr. Zelinski, I believe, is the one who's been negotiating this, so we'll work with Mr. Tucci to try to get some of these changed before and then we'll reintroduce it in August. Does that sound right?
Ms. Stutz, can we do that? Are we able to do it in August?
If the attorney is able to, you don't have a meeting to discuss any changes before August unless you call for an executive session
Right.
or a special meeting. So,
So do we-
Mayor, I
yeah.
guess, I guess we can proceed under that manner, because if we need to call for a special meeting, this is important enough for us to get together and do it. If
Agreed.
there's a time constraint, otherwise we'll, we gotta make sure we get the terms in and everything.
And so I'm following you, so you're suggesting to reintroduce it in August?
well, you're
And if-
gonna pull it right
We're gonna
now.
pull it
So it's
now.
not going to be
So
introduced at
you're
all.
Right,
not
we're gonna
gonna
pull
put
it now.
any pressure on yourself right now
Correct.
to reintroduce in August, other than August is the next meeting. You want these issues
ironed out.
ironed
Right.
out, and you don't have any scheduled meetings until August 12th is your next public meeting. So you don't have to, it does not have to go on the agenda for introduction on the 12th if those issues have not been addressed.
Understood.
But if
So
we
your
wanted
motion
to-
is gonna be to withdraw, like Councilman Sakala just said, is to table introduction until the agreement is advised, and that doesn't lock you into a date.
Go ahead,
But Mayor, if I
Councilman.
might, but Ms. Stutz, but if we wanna hear it in August, when do we need to let you know by? Let the mayor know, or we agree as a council? I don't wanna lose August, that's. what
Right, I would
I'd rather
agree. I
put
don't
it on-
wanna
I'd
lose
rather
August,
Put it on the
'cause-
calendar for August and pull it then, and keep the pressure on, because this is an important issue for us. I don't wanna lose the month, and maybe we get our concerns addressed between now and then. If we don't put it on the agenda for August now, can we?
Yes, I think what we do from here is you're tabling it pending the township manager further discussing this with the former township attorney who's handling this matter. The township manager, knowing your concerns, will let you know if they've been addressed, to what extent they've been addressed, and to what extent
It can be.
they can be addressed, whether this is a take it or leave it. There will probably be some sort of memo to you on that, and if it's at its best and final, it can then go on the agenda without having to.
We don't lose that
Okay.
You don't
opportunity.
have
We
to
won't
vote
lose-
on to put it on an agenda.
And I would agree with Councilman Tonella, because I don't want to lose August, because then who knows what happens in September, October, November. The only time constraint that we're all aware of is that they're expecting the money this year. So I would like to, so we'll pull it. We'll ask Mr. Tucci to work with Mr. Zelinski in negotiating some of the terms that we had discussed at our last meeting. And then we will target introduction at the August 12th meeting, is it?
Okay.
Is that fair?
Perfect.
Okay,
No objection.
all right, okay. Moving on to item 7B on the agenda, to consider introduction of pending ordinance number 19.
You know what?
No,
Councilman Sakala, I know you made the motion. Was there a second? And there needs to be a vote on that.
I seconded it. To
This
pull
is
it.
to table.
Yeah,
okay,
table.
okay, so this is a motion to table.
Right, to withdraw the
Okay.
previous motion to introduce and withdraw.
Okay, so we'll take a
So
step
we'll
back,
take
so
a roll call vote.
we have
on
a
that.
motion and we have a second. Roll call, please.
Councilman Sakala.
Yes.
Councilman Messeri.
Yes.
Councilman Tonella.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Yes.
Mayor Vargo.
Yes. Okay. All set, Ms. Stutz?
All set.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7B on the agenda, to consider introduction of pending ordinance number 19-846, amending Chapter 190 of the Township Code entitled Peddling and Soliciting. Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I move introduction of pending ordinance number 19-846 to be published in summary in the Verona City Grove Times as a pending ordinance with a public hearing scheduled for August 12, 2019.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Visconti, your office provided a memo on this topic, and I know we had some discussion about whether this was going to be limited to residences, and I think there were some political questions.
There was
Do you mind just giving us a quick overview of
Not
that?
at all. So we had provided an original memo with a copy of a draft ordinance for your review that included some modifications, including removing fingerprinting as a requirement for obtaining a permit, adding the do not knock list, and showing the procedure for how that was going to work. We then received some feedback from you. We provided a second memo regarding the scope of the ordinance. Does it apply to business solicitation? Does it apply to not-for-profit? Does it apply to political? The short answer is, by the terms of the ordinance as it exists and as it's drafted to be after adoption, it only applies to business solicitation. So those folks soliciting, commercial items, sales, services, things along those lines. It does not apply to not-for-profits, and it does not appear to apply or intend to apply to political campaigning, issue campaigning, anything along those lines.
9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Okay, and thank you, Councilman. And there was a lot of discussion about the time at our last meeting. And it appears that, soliciting will be conducted only between the hours of 9 a.m. and 9 p.m.
Correct.
And I think it's important, just for the public's edification, why we're looking at this and why we're going back and forth with council on this, because there are individuals there are some constitutional challenges.
There
Am
are.
I right there?
Frankly, this has
Go
been,
ahead.
this has been reviewed a few times. We had a company contact our office as township council and indicate that we have some concerns about the constitutionality of various portions of the ordinance. Here's some case law on it, take a look for yourself. We conducted a pretty thorough look at constitutional questions, especially for curfew, fingerprinting, along those lines. There is no case that I'm aware of that we were able to find that upheld a curfew prior to 9 p.m., except in the case where the township had documented evidence that the solicitors were engaging in crime or were somehow, you have to have such an important need to restrict it before 9 p.m. that we just haven't seen yet from the town. We don't have any police data. We don't have anything along those lines that show prohibiting it before 9 p.m. is somehow a safety issue. If we're going to prohibit business solicitation by 9 p.m., we have to consider prohibiting neighbors visiting neighbors before 9 p.m. because otherwise we're legislating on an issue-based basis. We're only legislating those who are soliciting, not those who are, visiting their neighbors casually or those who are seeking to rob homes but not engage in commercial transactions. I mean, it's unfortunate how it's been dealt with by the courts, but really the short answer is we need a really strong, legitimate basis to restrict it before 9 p.m. And we don't have any evidence that these solicitors are the source of crime or that it will make a marketable difference in crime statistics or safety or anything along those lines.
Councilman?
Mayor, yes, I know, Mr. Visconti, I agree with you. I think it is unfortunate that the courts have decided in the manner that they have, because when we were talking about this, having somebody solicit your home at 9 p.m., I think it's I don't know what the adjective you want to use, but I'd be really upset if someone's knocking on my door at 9 o'clock at night soliciting, especially come February when it's pitch black come 5 o'clock at night. And I know we had some pretty vocal discussions about this, but it's unfortunate. Our hands are unfortunately tied based upon what you're just telling us, and I'm glad the public's hearing this, because I know personally, if it's up to me, I wouldn't want somebody soliciting beyond maybe 6 o'clock, maybe 7 o'clock at the latest, because it gets dark, once we turn the clocks back. But based upon, your advice, I'm gonna go along with it, but I'm not happy about the time frame at all.
I couldn't agree more. I think it is unfortunate how case law has come down. I don't want to put you into a box, but frankly, it could be irresponsible of you to not consider the 9 p.m. because it would open you up to legal challenge. It would open up to fee shifting and constitutional challenges. So it's certainly something the board should consider.
And I think it's important to note that this council did consider those times. This council did consider, frankly, I agree with Councilman Tennell. I think 9 p.m. is too late. For me personally, I have 4 kids at home. They're all hopefully sleeping by 9 p.m. And if somebody comes and knocks on the door at 9 or at 8:55, it does cause some concern. But this council, I can tell you that we did, we strongly considered moving up that time frame earlier, but we didn't feel comfortable from advice of council that it would pass constitutional muster. We even considered having through the dusk to dawn, I think it was, that we considered, but then in the winter months and the summer months, it would be, the times would vary and it provide less certainty for anybody out there. So, I'm gonna also, we'll go, if there's any other discussion.
Well,
Councilman,
I'm sorry. Councilman.
So I'm assuming the constitutional question here is content-based speech restriction.
Correct.
So if we did some kind of limit, and this is just the question, if there was no solicitation, period, if we set a time earlier than 9 p.m., how would that fail in the courts? Because we're not picking on a particular content, right? We're not You know, we're not restricting a certain kind of speech. We're just saying we're gonna have a limit at 7 o'clock, regardless of whether you're a business, whether you're a political speech, whether it's, you know, a private organization. Why would that fail under the constitutional
Well,
argument?
not to ask a question with a question, I know this isn't a law school class, but is the purpose to prevent visitors to the home after 7 PM or whatever time? Or what is the purpose we're trying to establish here?
Well, if the visitor is Mayor Vargo, I may restrict him from coming to my home, but after a certain hour. No, seriously, isn't that an invitee though? If someone comes to your home and is a visitor, you're allowing them to come into your home. That's your choice. How is that a content, restriction, right? How is that different from a stranger coming to your home, ringing your doorbell and asking you, for whatever, a business question or a political speech or whatever? I find that to be two completely different things.
There's a couple answers there. One is consider the case of a next door neighbor who calls you and says, I'm coming over, versus a next door neighbor who knocks on your door at 8:30, says, I'm out of milk, or I need 2 eggs to make dinner. If you don't know they're coming, they're asking you for something. It's not commercial in nature, but they're also an uninvited guest. You have not invited them at that point because they didn't call in advance. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but there is case law about distinguishing on that basis. The other answer is that if we were to do this broadly and do it completely even keeled, not content-based, it wouldn't be subject to strict scrutiny, it'd still be subject to intermediate scrutiny. And we would still need to be able to connect the dots between what we're trying to do and what benefit it has for the neighbors. If we're saying it reduces crime, we better be able to show that there are crime statistics showing that, people knocking on doors after 7 PM are more likely to commit crimes or people knocking on doors after 7 PM are more likely than those knocking after 9 PM. We really have to be able to take it from A to Z if it's gonna be challenged. Yeah. The other answer is, it's possible that no one ever challenges this, that you adopt it, nothing's ever illegal until it's caught. So it does open you up to liability. There are still issues. I would love to tell you there's a way to do this without a 9 PM curfew. But even if you were to say, it's unsafe for the people walking, well, again, you're not telling neighbors they can't visit their neighbor's home. You're not saying that someone who's not soliciting can't walk in this part of town because there's no street light or because there's no sidewalk. Unfortunately, you're really painted into a box here.
And I remember when we had the discussion, Mr. Semeraro, he was pointing to, we would ask a question and he knew the case right off the top of his head, why we couldn't do certain things. So, just using the 8 o'clock as an example, he knew that there was no case law out there that passed an 8 o'clock. So we asked a lot of those questions. Mr. Semeraro he was pretty familiar with the case law at the time.
So that's the not great news. The good news for residents is that we now have, if this ordinance goes into effect, we'll have the do not knock list, which means you're putting your home on a list that prevents any solicitation from being on your property. Somehow this is one of the less restrictive means that the Supreme Court says is okay, as opposed to you folks saying up here you can't visit any homes. It's allowing the residents to make that choice. And it's a very simple process. It makes Ms. Stutz's life a little more difficult because she has to maintain the list, but it would sort of moot the time question for those who opt into the list. They wouldn't be able to come at 9 AM, 5 PM, or 9 PM. It doesn't matter once you're on the list.
Any other questions? Good.
Good answer.
Any other questions? So, roll call, Ms. Stutz?
Councilman Sakala,
Yes.
Councilman Masseri,
Yes.
Councilman Canella,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson,
Yes.
Mayor Varga.
Yes. Moving on to item 7C on the agenda, to consider resolution concerning return of developer agreement escrow, Grove Ave SPE LLC. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second, Mayor.
Any discussion? I do have one question on this. So when we look at it, Grove Ave SPE, do we know the location of this? That's
It's
the,
the Zephyr
The
Ridge
Zephyr
Apartments.
Ridge.
oh, that's the
Yeah.
Zephyr Ridge. Okay, okay,
They were
perfect.
required to post on, when they requested the return of their developer escrows, the municipal engineer, the
Yep.
gazebo had not yet been built, so the municipal engineer requested a $10,000 escrow to guarantee the construction of that gazebo. That has been placed on site, and the municipal engineer, they've requested the release of that now, and the municipal engineer has authorized that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ms. Stutz.
Okay.
Roll call?
Councilman Sakala.
Yes.
Councilman Messeri.
Yes.
Councilman Tinelli.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Yes.
Mayor Vargo.
Yes. Item 7D on the agenda, to consider resolution concerning renewal of inactive ABC license Ram Ven Inc. Do I have a motion?
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Sakala.
Yes.
Councilman Messeri.
Yes.
Councilman Tinelli.
Abstain.
Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Yes.
Mayor Vargo.
Yes. Item 7E on the agenda, to consider resolution concerning tax reduction granted by Tax Court of New Jersey. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve, Mayor.
Second, Mayor.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Sakala.
Yes.
Councilman Messeri.
Yes.
Councilman Tinelli.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Yes.
Mayor Vargo.
Yes. Item 7F on the agenda, to consider resolution concerning special item of revenue hazard mitigation grant. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mayor?
Second.
Under discussion? I do want to just point out that 7F and 7G, if you look, we are, under 7F, we are inserting the special item of revenue for the hazard mitigation of $53,145. And then on 7G, where you'll see we have the purchase not to exceed $53,145. So 7F and 7G, if I'm correct, Ms. Stutz, appear to be somewhat related.
Right. We
Okay.
got grant money to
Yeah.
purchase.
So that's we received the grant money, and then we have to insert it into the budget.
That's correct, Mayor.
Once we insert it into the budget, then we can make the purchase, which is 7F.
Right.
Okay. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Sakala.
Yes.
Councilman Messeri.
Yes.
Councilman Tinelli.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Yes.
Mayor Vargo.
Yes. Item 7G on the agenda, to consider resolution concerning purchase through National Cooperative for Caterpillar Emergency Generator System. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second, Mayor.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Sakala.
Yes.
Councilman Messeri.
Yes.
Councilman Tinelli.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Yes.
Mayor Vargo.
Yes. Item 7H on the agenda, to consider resolution concerning waiver of water/sewer penalty fees. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mayor?
Do I have a second?
Mayor.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Sakala.
Yes.
Councilman Messeri.
Yes.
Councilman Tinelli.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Yes.
Mayor Vargo.
Yes. Item 7I on the agenda, to consider resolution concerning 2018 municipal audit. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve, Mayor.
Second?
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Sakala.
Yes.
Councilman Messeri.
Yes.
Councilman Tinelli.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Yes.
Mayor Vargo.
Yes. Item 7J on the agenda, to consider resolution concerning corrective action plan. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mayor.
Second, Mayor?
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Sakala.
Yes.
Councilman Messeri.
Yes.
Councilman Tinelli.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Yes.
Mayor Vargo.
Yes. Item number 8 on the agenda, approval of bills.
Be it resolved that the summary of bills having been duly audited and found correct are hereby ordered paid in the amount of $3,395,677.55.
Make
Do
a
a
motion to
motion.
approve, Mayor.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Sakala?
Yes.
Councilman Messeri?
Yes.
Councilman Pinello?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Mayor Vargo?
Yes. At this time, we'll move on to item 9 on the agenda. The meeting's open to residents of the township wishing to be heard on any item on or off the agenda concerning township business. Mr. DeVico, how you doing today?
Good evening. Charles Trevico, 111 Holly Lane. I actually had a couple of questions, and I'm not quite sure that we're going to get answers tonight since Mr. Tucci is not here. However, I took the liberty of looking over the 2019 municipal budget and the user-friendly version, which is located on the township website. And amongst many interesting things, the one thing that kind of caught my eye, which I know Mr. Tucci had reported in the past, at past meetings, is the assessed values of the taxable portions of our properties within the municipality. And it was a little over $2 billion, $2.2 billion, which was reported, I think, in April when Mr. Tucci made that report. And it shows it broken out by the various categories of residential, commercial, and some of that nature. On that same page, to the right portion of that, is the listing of the properties that are exempt from property taxation. And of course, those are our schools, our municipal buildings, churches and charities. And then there is a category known as 15F, other exempt. We have 379 parcels of property that are exempt from taxation. That includes 5 public schools, 81 public properties, 19 churches and charities. 274 other exempt. So my question was, what is other exempt that has 274 parcels of property that are exempt from property taxes? That represents 72% of our exempt properties are found in one category known as other exempt. Further on that process, which again, we won't get an answer tonight, but it's just one of interest, those 274 parcels represent assessed value of $32.7 million. So it's not chump change that we're talking about, which would represent roughly $785,000 in taxes at our tax rate, 20% of that for municipal usage, so you're talking $150,000 to $175,000. I have no idea what's in the 274. They obviously are legitimate because they have to find themselves to be exempt from property tax. So it was just a question of how do we have 72% of our parcels in other exempt? I recognize churches and schools and buildings, but the other part I did not. The other question that I related to that, and again, this relates to now the 379 exempt properties, do they pay water sewage bills? Does our school system, does our town hall, does our churches, do they pay for water usage and sewer? Answer is yes.
I'm
I
getting a
think.
nod, so Mr. DeVico, I'm going to thank you for making my first question from a resident a very easy question. So I'm getting a nod, at least on the second part of your question, that they do pay that.
All right, so we can.
Ms.
we can-
Stutz, is that right? With regard to your first question, I don't personally know the answer to what is made up of those 274 properties. I'm sure Mr. Tucci does. Mr. Visconti, do you have any idea what those properties would be?
They could be county parks, they could be county land, they could be all number of things, but
Okay.
I don't want to say I have a breakdown or know exactly what they are.
It's like, it was just striking the
Sure.
percentage and so on like that, but the real answer, which Ms. Stutz just gave, is that everyone is paying their share of water and sewer usage, that the property tax, those that are being taxed aren't also being burdened by carrying the usage and so on of those that are exempt from property taxes. That was the real point I was trying to get to, I guess.
Understood.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, close that portion of the meeting. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all for coming today. We look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.